All right, the next unit, Unit 4, begins in Chapter 4, and Section 4.1 is complex numbers. So complex numbers are also dealing with complex plane, which is imaginary numbers. Typically what we'll have here, we'll have the real plane, where we would normally write the x-axis, and the imaginary plane using the y-axis. We'll get more into that later on, but what we have, our imaginary number is, we're going to use the letter I for imaginary number. That's going to equal the square root of -1. You've been told long time you can't take a square root of a negative number. If you've seen this before, you know what this is, but otherwise this is an imaginary number, I. And there's a little process, little the I and multiply by another I. We're going to get -1. If we multiply I times I times I, that gives us -I. And that's I to the third, so if we take I to the fourth is equal to 1. I to the fifth is 1 times I to the fourth, which is 1 times, I times e to the fourth, which is I times 1, which equals I again, and the process repeats. So I to the sixth will be -1, I to the seventh will be -I, and so forth. So that's how the imaginary number works. We have a standard form for complex numbers, and that is a plus bi. So a plus bi, where a and b are numbers, real numbers. So a and b are elements of the real number line. So that's our standard form. So if a question asks you to put the answer in a standard form, this is what they're looking for. All right, so let me scroll down a little bit and let me leave the standard form there. And let's do a couple problems from the book. Again, this is on page 319. You see there at the top. So page 319 is where these problems are coming from. All right, so let's do, we've got a group here, write the complex number in standard form. So we're going to use the standard form that we have above. So number 11 in your book, we're given 2 plus the square root of -25. All right, so typically if you see a negative number inside of a radical, a square root, you simply just pull out an I ahead of time. So I'm going to do that in the future, but right now I'm just going to kind of show you by hand how this would work. So this equals, we don't need to write like that. I'll just go right below. So this is 2 plus the square root of -1 times 5 squared. And that's equivalent to 2 plus the square root of -1 times the square root of 5 squared. Because it's a square root. If you've got two things within it, you can break it into two that you multiply together. Basic rules. And as far as the complex numbers go in the first place, all of the general things that you know in algebra and arithmetic concerning addition, multiplication, and so forth works for these as well. So you can combine like terms that have i's, you can combine just other constants, that's okay. All right, so anyway, this is 2 plus we have an I here. Root -1 is I. And then square root of 5 squared is just 5. And in standard form, this would be 2 plus 5i. And there's probably more work in there than was certainly necessary. But for the first problem, I think that's a fair way to do it. Let's take a look at number 15. 15 in your book is the square root of negative 40. Okay, so right away I can just pull an I out. And then 40 breaks down into 4 times 10. It's 4 times 2 times 5. 2 and 5 are primes, so we can't pull them out. But 4 is 2 squared, so this is going to equal 2 square root of 10i. And so in this case, our a is 0, and our b is 2 root 10. So in standard form, essentially we don't write the 0, but it's there. Essentially. All right. One more from this group here. Let's do number 19. And I'll move on to another group of problems. All right, so number 19, they give you 6i plus I squared. Okay. So we know from above that I squared is just negative 1. I times I is negative 1. And actually, let me break this up. Well, we'll use that for now. So we've got 6i minus 1. Writing it in standard form is negative 1 plus 6i. All right, and these are the problems from that section. I think I'm just going to make another video with the next section of problems and maybe add a couple things to your notes as well.